Hey, g'day, boys and girls, shillers and blokes. My name is Jacob, and today's the day I finally got around to making part 2 of my Monster Hunter World The Board Game video series. Yes, you heard that right, this is a part 2. So if you haven't watched the first video yet, then I'll leave a link up on screen and also in the description if you'd like to watch that first. But also, if you didn't feel like clicking off this video to watch that one, then it's perfectly fine. I'll be reiterating the relevant information from that first video here whenever it's necessary, because unlike the last time I covered this game, I actually understand the rules and mechanics a hell of a lot better now, and I'm pretty confident I can properly convey them to everyone. So without further ado, Monster Hunter World the board game. What's it all about? Well, it's a board game version of Monster Hunter World. Yeah, I know, I am shocked too. Monster Hunter World the board game was created in 2022 by Steamforged Games after an extremely successful Kickstarter campaign, raising nearly 7 million Australian dollar dues. That number still blows me away considering how big it is compared to how many people still don't know this side game exists. But yeah, Steamforged are the creators behind this project alongside many other video game board games like Resident Evil or Dark Souls to name only two of them. Since the launch of Monster Hunter World the board game's first set, the Ancient Forest Core Kit, this Monhun sub-series has seen an abundance of expansions from a new core kit set in the Wildspire Waste to a few additional Elder Dragon add-on hunts or a more traditional Rotten Vale campaign expansion. A campaign expansion I still cannot buy in Australia yet. If anyone at Steamforged happens to be watching this video, then please consider releasing the Picking Bones expansion down under, or just let it ship overseas because I'd happily pay however much shipping you'd do, but I digress. All of that I just mentioned is not even counting Iceborne the board game, which released last year and is getting much of the same treatment as the base world board game is with all of its extra expansions. Looking at the release rate we're going at, it seems we won't be getting a Monster Hunter Rise the board game until Wild's expansion drops possibly in 2026. That's if we're even getting a Rise board game at all, which I hope we do. I love Rise. If you wanted to check the board game out for yourselves, I'll drop some links in the description and you can just click on those and go from there. Introduction over now, let's get into the deets of my most recent play session. But first, contrary to what I said in the previous board game video, I didn't actually continue that original campaign as planned. If you've watched it, then you likely know why. Scheduling around both my mates and I's busy schedules wasn't easy, and after a while, my mate didn't feel like playing anymore. And I kinda sympathize with his decision since after fumbling around through one game, struggling to understand the rules myself, I wasn't very keen to jump back in either. And that's why the board game would sit untouched for over half a year, until an opening at one of my usual Dungeons & Dragons game nights would give me the opportunity to hunt again, this time with a fresh new party. Enter that guy, a total newbie hunter who's never played any Monster Hunter game before now. Based on a recommendation, he picked up the Insect Glaive after debating about trying the Charge Blade for a bit. Next, there is Torlok, another fledgling hunter who's heard about Monster Hunter but never given it a try. She chose to play Hunting Horn because she wanted to play a supportive role. Then after her comes the mysterious Subject 7. This bloke has at least played a little bit of World in the past, and like a true champion he played the hammer, so that's what he went with here. And lastly there was me, Sir Jacob. I would choose the Switch Axe this time. Not because the hammer was taken already, but because I wanted to try Switch Axe for another video I was working on at the time. If you've watched my older videos, you'd likely know what that is, and I promise to finish it sometime this year. But yeah, just like an actual Monster Hunter game, 4 players is the party cap. Don't worry though if you don't have 4 people to play with at home, because just like in the video games, you can bring up to 2 palicos to fill in a couple of the remaining slots. Although, since this is a board game, hence not bound by the laws of the game's coding, You could cheat by bringing palicos on a 3 or 4 player hunt. However, I would personally cap it at only bringing 1 palico with 3 players. That way things will stay balanced to a degree. And also it'll be kinda like playing Monster Hunter Generations. So we have our 4-player hunting party sorted, but that night we actually had 5 people with us. Our DM decided he would take the self-elected role of the Hunt Master, which meant he would be in control of the monsters we fought, the resource management systems like the monster physiology and time cards, as well as the biggest part that I am thankful for, reading the bloody rulebook for us. There is a lot of stuff I just mentioned here that warrants an explanation, but before I do any of that, I want to clarify to everyone watching that a Hunt Master is not a real thing in the Monster Hunter World board game. We are a D&D group and decided having one would fit our usual playstyle better, plus this way nobody is being left out of the game. Ordinarily, the players would handle the monster's actions as well as their own characters and time cards, but since we had an extra person with us, we thought that having a Hunt Master would be a good idea. And it definitely was a good bloody idea, let me tell ya. Last time I tried the board game, I think I spent more time reading the rulebooks than I did playing the game, which made the whole process very confusing. So having someone here dedicated to doing that made our play session go super smooth. And now with everything set up properly on our end, it was time for us to begin the expedition into the Wildspire Waste. Every expedition begins with no items and only the default starting equipment, which like I said in my last video is really strange because what hunter in their right mind goes on a quest without any items? Although in the years since that video, I have picked up the new headcanon that this is some kind of survival challenge the New World hunters compete in for fun, just to try and justify the rule. The goal during these expeditions is to hunt monsters and gather items, much like in the actual video games, but with the objective here being to remain in the hunting ground until you clear a 4-star difficulty quest within the allotted campaign time limit to win the game. The campaign timer is recommended to be 25 days by default, but you can find various modifiers in the back of the rulebook to spice up your expeditions. While reading these just now, I noticed the rulebook has an assisted campaign mode that says all 4 players can bring a palico, so I suppose you're not really cheating if you do that, unlike what I said earlier, as it's allowed in the rulebook apparently. Anyway, my party just went with the default 25 days for our campaign with 0 assists. After we decided this, we had to pick a target monster from the quest book. Since I only have the Wildspire Waste core kit, our options were the Baroth, the Pookie Pookie, the Mudsloth, Diablos, and his angry partner the Black Diablos. For our first hunt, we chose to go with the Pookie Pookie. I think the rulebook wanted us to fight Baroth first, but last time I played this game, Baroth wiped the floor with me, so I asked the party if we could fight the Pookie instead. After all, they have the same quest difficulty as each other, so theoretically it wouldn't be too big a difference. But in practice, Pookie hit just as hard as the Baroth did, only this bastard could poison us on top of that. The quests here come in 3 different forms: Assigned, Investigation, and Tempered Investigation. The first time you fight any new monster, you have to pick the assigned quest version. Then, once the quest is selected, you move onto the tracking phase. This part works similar to one of those pick your own adventure books with the party deciding on what course of actions to take. For the assigned Pookie quest, the first step essentially asked if we wanted to gather or rush straight to the monster. That guy and Torlok both chose the smart option to gather on the way, whereas Subject 7 wanted to rush straight into the Pookie Pookie. If I was an intelligent hunter, I would have also picked the option to gather, but that night I wasn't. I decided to go against my own better judgment by picking Rush In just to put us in a tiebreaker situation for the lols. In order to resolve this, our Huntmaster flipped a coin, and to everyone but Subject 7's displeasure, we were rushing straight into the Pookie Pookie. This decision would later come back to bite me in the ass. Also, I've realized after the quest while reading the booklet that the rush in option is available on every quest except the assigned Baroth, who was the original intended starting monster. I reckon it's set up this way so that on the intended first campaign quests, players can gather resources and supplies to help early in the beginning of the campaign. Then, on any of the following day's hunts, you could choose the rush in option to potentially save time cards to use on the hunting phase. This is the second time I've brought up time cards, and I bet now would be a good time to finally explain what these are. These essentially function as your in-game quest timer for the board game. Additionally, each time card has an extra effect on them that does various things, but most of the time it just comes down to either buffing/debuffing the player or monster. During the tracking phase, you discard a number of time cards per tracking step when you're told to do so, and then once you enter the hunt phase, at the end of each hunter's turn, you draw one time card from the time deck and resolve the allocated effects before moving on. So, since we skipped the gathering phase, we quickly found ourselves face to face with a Pookie. This begins the hunting phase. At the start of battle, one player draws a monster behavior card from the behavior deck, which dictates how the monster will react. Since my group had a hunt master with us, he would be the one drawing the cards, and for Pookie's opening attack, he drew a really nasty opener. This card was called Tongue Whip Right, and just looking at this you can tell, there is a lot of symbols on this card. So much so that the official rulebook takes 5 whole pages to explain them all in detail, and even then it still asks you to reference parts on other pages. Like, damn, do you see why I keep saying this game is so confusing? To save everyone the time, I'm going to speedrun naming them now, and then I'll attempt to briefly explain the most relevant few. Alright, so are you ready? This is the name, obviously. Sometimes there's a number here for tracking. This is the attack target, this is for movement. Here is the damage, around here is the damage type. Here is the attack range. That's the dodge value. The symbol that decides whether it's a single target or AoE attack goes here. This tells you how many hunters can move after the monster's turn. And lastly, this tells you how many attacks each hunter will get. Alright. That was just 11 symbols. I'm hoping you caught all of that because I even left a couple out that I thought were irrelevant just to try and make the explanation easier. The important ones here that I'm about to discuss are targeting, movement, range/attack type, dodge value, and damage. So please take a seat if you weren't already seated and get ready to take notes as we start with targeting. A monster's behavior card will specify if the monster's going to attack either the closest, furthest, or one specific hunter decided by their hunter token number. Oh yeah, these hunter tokens are sorted out while setting up the board. I kind of skipped that part, sorry. For this attack, the monster will target the closest hunter, or in this case, hunters, as the 4 of us are currently doubled up on 2 separate tiles. Once a monster has a target, the movement value will indicate how far it can move in that direction for its attack. So if you remember our current attack, Tongue Whip Right, its movement value is 2 spaces forward. So looking at the board, the Pookie can move towards us twice, putting the monster directly in front of the party. Now we have its attack range and attack type. The attack's range is 2 spaces, meaning it can attack the first space next to it, as well as the second space behind those. Additionally, its attack type is indicated as an arc attack that sweeps from the front of the monster to its right side. Looking at the board again, you can see this allows the attack to hit that guy and I who are both right in front of it, then sweep along to the right to finish where thankfully nobody else is standing. However, if this was a tongue whip left, then the attack would have moved in the other direction, also hitting Torlock and Subject 7 because of that card's attack arc. So in hindsight, this opener could have been much worse. Next up, we have the dodge value, indicated here by the number 4. This represents the difficulty hunters will have dodging the attack. To successfully dodge this, you must place a number of attack cards face down on your stamina board with an agility score up to or over the indicated dodge value. I also skipped what the stamina board is earlier, but trust me, this is just as much to cover as the monster behavior card I'm trying to get through right now. Basically, TLDR, this is your hunter's stat sheet. In the middle is the stamina bar, where you place your attacks from left to right following the arrow. Below this is your palico and equipment slots, and above it is room for your attack and damage deck. The attack deck's card list is decided based on your current equipped weapon as shown at the bottom of the weapon card. With the default gear equipped, we only have the basic attacks right now. After shuffling these cards, you draw attacks from this deck up to the max hand size of 5. Then we have the damage deck, which is pretty much the same thing. You get a set number of cards in this deck as indicated on your weapon card, and you draw cards up to the damage value on your played attacks that turn. And that is another whole 4 pages in the rulebook I summarized as best I could, as quickly as I could. I'll say it again, there's a lot of stuff to learn in the board game. Too much even. I find it quite intimidating. It's part of why I was left so baffled during my first video talking about it. But I'm getting sidetracked here, my apologies. I really need to finish explaining the monster's behavior card before anything else. So Tongue Whip Right has a dodge value of 4. That guy and I needed to beat using the agility score of the cards in our hand. This here is what an attack card looks like, and up here in the top right is the agility score. Dodging isn't shared amongst hunters, so each of us had to place down our own cards equaling 4 or more. That guy would use 3 of his cards with the dodge values of 1, 1, and 2 to avoid the attack, whereas I would use nothing. You see, I made a massive unintentional mistake when drawing my attack cards. The Switch Axe has a unique mechanic where it has 2 separate attack decks, one for the axe form and another for the sword. And when it comes to playing Switch Axe in Monster Hunter, I tend to lean more into the sword mode rather than the axe. So all of the cards I drew here that night were straight out of my sword attack deck. And just looking at these cards here, you will see every sword card has a dodge value of 0. I will admit, this is an interesting way to represent the limited movement sword mode has in the main games, but also this meant I was royally fucked. So finally, let's discuss damage. Since that guy dodged the attack, he would take 0 damage, but is forced to move as many spaces away from his current position up to his spent agility score, which for this attack is 4 spaces. Meanwhile, I face tanked a whole 8 damage. I know this might not sound like a whole lot, since in Monster Hunter World, hunters have 100 HP by default, and with skills plus the food buff they get 200 HP, but in the board game version of World, hunters have a measly total of 8 health. This attack right here would have outright one-tapped me if not for the 1 defense I had from my starting chainmail leggings, reducing the total damage I received to 7. Leaving me at 1 hit point. It was about now I started to regret putting us in that silly situation where we skipped gathering supplies beforehand. This is a clean-cut example of karma. So that's the monster's turn finally explained. It took a whole lot longer than I personally would have liked, so I hope everyone is still here with me. Up next we have the hunter's turn. To start this step, do you remember what I said these 2 symbols here are? The hunter's turn symbol and the hunter's action symbol. These represent how many players get a turn and the amount of attacks they can each do on it. So with Tongue Whip Right resolved, this behavior card allows for 3 of us to act after the Pookie's turn with up to 2 attacks each. There is no order for who has to act first as far as I'm aware. The only restriction is after a hunter's turn, you can't have another one until every other person has had one as well. For example, if player 2 acts first, they can't act again until players 1, 3, and 4 have all had a turn each. But if say player 3 was the last player to act, resetting the turn order, they could immediately act again starting the new one, and then not being able to get their turn until players 1, 2, and 4 have all had their turns next. Since the 4 of us wanted to get buffs going ASAP, we let Turlock move first. At the start of a player's turn, you'll have to decide whether you wish to perform combat or preparation actions. You can only choose one of these categories, but you're free to make as many actions from that category on your turn as you like. Combat actions include attacking, which should go without saying if you know anything about Monster Hunter, as well as walking and sprinting. The way this part works is you get one free space of movement per turn called a walk. Walking is optional, so you don't have to move if you don't want to, and to move any additional spaces past your walk, you'll have to sprint by placing an attack card with at least one agility point face down on the stamina board to sprint up to the consumed agility total. This is pretty much the same as moving by dodging. Lastly, attacking is performed by placing attack cards from your hand onto the stamina board up to the allowed number of attacks as shown on the monster's behavior card. For this turn, Turlock gets 2 attacks. She would play White Hilt Stab and Overhead Smash. There's a few symbols on these cards to go over, so let's speedrun that now, shall we? Up here's the frequently mentioned agility score. In the middle is always the damage card total, and sometimes you have extra symbols here, like on Overhead Smash, Turlock has a status symbol for KO and a bonus movement point that, unlike dodging, is optional if you want to use it. As we move below these, we have the attack range, combo counter, and whilst there isn't any symbol on these cards, some attacks have a tenderizing point down here that add towards the monster's part break. The aforementioned combo counter is a requirement that you have to meet by placing face-up attacks on your stamina board first before playing the combo card. While I was reading the rules here again now, I think Turlock might have needed to play 2 other cards first before playing Overhead Smash, but I could be wrong. Our Huntmaster allowed the action at the time, and he read far more of this book than I have. But then again, he could have also been confused by it like I was the first time I played. Anyway, that all aside, Turlock's played both of her attacks, meaning it's now time to calculate the damage. Both attacks have 1 damage card worth of damage on them each, so Turlock draws 2 damage cards from the damage deck. She would draw 2 cards worth 1 damage each, but that's kinda to be expected with the starting weapons. After this, the Pookie takes 2 points of damage, then Turlock draws a time card, she resolves its effect, and then we move on to the next player's turn. To spare us all the time, because I'm currently at 58 minutes in recording prior to cutting any of this down, I'm not going to run through everyone's actions play by play. I'll only cover one more turn in detail, that being my second turn in combat when I took the preparation action, so I can explain how that bit works. But first, a super quick summary of my first turn in combat for context. After Turlock's turn and Subject 7 after her, I swung at the monster to get rid of 2 of my sword attacks so I can start drawing axe form cards to fix my current lack of agility. However, the time card I drew after this was called Poison Cup. If you've played World, you'd probably know these as those really annoying plants you sometimes walk into while fighting a monster. The way this time card works was I had to roll a d6 to decide its effect. If I rolled a 1 to 3, the monster is poisoned, but on a 4 to 6, I get poisoned instead. And I would roll a bloody 5. I swear, this is the only game I know where rolling high on a dice is actually a bad thing. But yeah, I got poisoned, meaning on the end of my next turn, I suffered 2 points of damage, effectively killing me since, if you remember, I'm only on 1 hit point. This is karma. I was already regretting making us skip the gathering phase, but at this point right here, I actively hated myself for it. So skipping ahead now to my next turn and my impending death, I was ready to come face to face with my makers. However, thankfully for me, our Huntmaster was feeling merciful and ruled that we started the quest with potions so I could heal up and remove the poison. Like I said, it's kind of insane you don't start with potions in this game anyway, so I wasn't about to complain, especially given my current circumstances. Anyway, this is the part where I use the preparation action category. So if you choose to prep, then during that turn you're able to perform any of the following actions once. The first being to use a potion to heal to max health and clear the stamina board, which I absolutely did, bumping me back up to the max 8 hit points. I also cleared my stamina board, but I only had 1 card on it, which would have been discarded at the end of that turn anyways, so that didn't really matter. Aside from taking a potion, you can also sharpen your weapon during this turn. In the board game, this means to shuffle all of your used damage cards back into the damage deck. I didn't use this action though, since I only used a few of my damage cards on the first turn, all of which were for a measly 1 damage. I thought it would be best to leave them out of my deck so I can find that one card I have that deals the big 4 damage a lot easier. Lastly, similar to the combat category, you can also walk and sprint during a preparation turn. And with that, it basically wraps up everything you can do on the hunter's turn. Just to summarize how the turn orders flow, you always start with a monster's attack card followed by the hunters who react based on the drawn monster's behavior card. As for how the remaining hunt went, I'll share with you a few of the highlights. Turlock and Subject 7 were definitely the MVPs here. Turlock on the Hunting Horn provided several helpful buffs to everyone, one of which saved her life when she was hit by an attack she couldn't afford to dodge. Meanwhile, Subject 7 was using the hammer to absolute perfection, dropping back-to-back combo attacks each turn, acting as our main damage dealer. Between the two of them wailing on the monster with their blunt weapons, they would KO the shit out of Pookie Pookie, who would spend all of its following turns in a KO'd state. The KO effect works differently in the board game though, as it doesn't temporarily immobilize the monster like it does in the main games. Here, KO makes it so whenever a monster attacks on its next turn, the agility score needed to dodge the damage is only 1 agility point. Thinking about this more after the fact, KO here kind of acts more like a flash bomb would in the main game, strangely enough. But yeah, this meant we had an easier time not getting hit again unless we clogged up our stamina boards by attacking. Which, sadly for that guy, he had done on his first turn to dodge the opening attack. He would spend most of his remaining turns struggling to gather incense needed to activate the Insect Glaive's unique mechanics. Meanwhile, since I was betting on only ever needing 1 agility to dodge the Pookie's attacks, I would begin drawing a lot more sword mode cards again. Some of these cards even had the KO effect on them, allowing me to join as an honorary member of the Bonk Brigade, KOing the poor Pookie Pookie to death. But interestingly enough, the Proto Switch Axe I was using in Monster Hunter World doesn't have the exhaust file, so don't ask me how I was doing it, I was just doing it. But you know what the craziest part about all of this KO spam is? In the board game, you don't have to hit the head to apply KO. You can swing at any part of the monster and it still procs the KO status. And even crazier than that is the fact you can cut a monster's tail off with a hammer. Yes, you heard that right. Cut a tail with a hammer. There's no damage types in the game outside physical and elemental, so part break damage counts to any part no matter the weapon. By the end of this hunt, Subject 7 managed to deal enough part damage to the Pookie's tail to sever it off. Speaking of, real quick, any attack card that has this symbol here will apply a tenderize point to the attached body part. After you hit it enough with break attacks, you will destroy the part and get the allocated item at the end of the hunt. And lastly, aside from my shitty roll on turn 1 that poisoned me, we all actually rolled pretty good on the following time cards, allowing us to also proc paralysis and sleep on the Pookie Pookie while it was simultaneously KO'd. Paralysis also doesn't work like it's supposed to in the main games, with it here reducing a monster's movement to 0 but still allowing it to attack, which for our hunt meant nothing as Pookie was always beside us, hence in range to hit everyone, but with it suffering from KO, that was easy enough to avoid. Sleep on the other hand is a little bit OP, and it works like how KO and Paralysis should have worked, by skipping the monster's attack on its next drawn behavior card and only resolving the hunter's actions on that turn. Oh, and I almost forgot about the rewards. On the back of the Monster Physiology card, you will find all of the loot you can earn from the part breaks alongside a dice roll table. Hunters will roll 2 dice at the end of a quest and choose items based on their rolled numbers. After this, you return to camp for downtime, but I won't explain those activities here since, just like in the last video, I didn't do any of them. But while we're here, everyone but me crafted armor with the parts they earned from this quest. I could have made something myself, but instead I gave some of my materials to Turlock so she could craft new armor as well. She was new to Monhun and I didn't want her to feel left out. Besides that, the concept of trading monster materials, it's a new one for me. I can't do this in the main series games, so fuck it, I'm taking the chance here to break the Hunter's Code. Come at me, Guild Knights, you mad? But anyway, I ought to shut up and start wrapping up this video, as I can tell it's going to be another long one after all of those long-winded explanations I gave. I partially feel like I might have over-explained everything and bored some people off my video, but at the same time, I feel like I owed it to my audience and also the creators behind the board game to give these systems a proper summary this time round. In the first board game video I made, I kept saying I didn't understand the rules and I don't like how overly complicated they were to learn. I still feel that way now after playing it again and studying the rulebook afterwards just for this video, because yeah, it's a lot to learn all at once. It is a hell of a bloody lot to try and learn all at once. And I didn't really try to learn them for that first video, since while I was recording the audio, I didn't have the rulebook on hand to reference because I left the game at G-Freeze in the hopes we'd resume playing another day. I feel like I essentially shared nothing of value other than, hey, this game exists, have you heard about it? Which is why I'm trying to compensate for skipping everything then in this video. Anyways, I didn't mean to ramble too much here at the end. If you've made it this far, then cheers. I appreciate your support. You just being here goes a long way with helping a small channel like mine grow. Please consider liking the video if you liked it, or dislike it if you didn't. I'm open to dialogue in the comments, so if you have any questions about what we've talked about here today, or perhaps something I may have skipped over or even got wrong, then feel free to drop it below. And subscribe for more Monster Hunter content like this. I doubt this will be my last time covering the board game, even if part 3 takes me another year to get to. I also have plenty of other ideas for Monster Hunter related videos, including a complete playthrough of Wilds when that's out, so please look forward to it. Alright, that's all. Have a good one, people. Cheers.